Welcome to Biblical Archaeology in 5. In today's video, we're in Exodus chapter 14, which is a very famous and infamous passage of Scripture, seeing as it deals with the parting of the Red Sea. Many of you will think of this passage as a great story of miracle, which of course it is. But Biblical Archaeology will open this up and let us see that it is way more than a story of the miraculous. Now, you know this story. The children of Israel have just escaped from Egypt, but now they appear to be wandering aimlessly in the desert. Pharaoh sees this. He realizes it's his chance. He made a mistake. He gave up free slaves. So he takes his army and he finds them on the shore of the Red Sea, the ocean. In verse 10, what does Moses tell us? When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. Then Moses gives us the life lesson of this passage when you see in verses 13 and 14, Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." And then the miraculous happens. The angel of the Lord, who appears in a pillar of cloud and fire, comes and separates Pharaoh's army from the Israelites, and then the miraculous happens. The waters part, the land is dry, Israel walks across. Then, of course, the angel lifts, and Pharaoh sees that Israel has escaped. And in his pride, he chases after them. You know the story. But Moses says that the Lord looks down from the cloud on Egypt, on Pharaoh. And what does he do? He reverses the miracle. Their wheels in the chariots get caught in the mud, and the waters come, and every man is drowned, and their bodies litter the seashore. And then Moses writes that great psalm in chapter 15 that portrays Yahweh as a mighty warrior. Now here is where Biblical Archaeology rides to the rescue. The first thing that I would draw your attention is back to verse 10, because it says that the people saw Pharaoh and they lift up their eyes. Now the first thing that I would have you think about is that Egyptologists teach us that Pharaoh was thought to be a son of the gods. When he became Pharaoh, he got the name of his god added to his name. In fact, the very crown that they put on his head, which had the emblem of the vulture and the cobra, they believed that these emblems held the power of the gods of Upper and Lower Egypt, and that the cobra, some said, could even spit out fire. These things were designed to create fear in the heart of Pharaoh's enemies. And so they did. And that's what verse 10 is telling us. So archaeology supports that whoever wrote this knew the ways and customs of Egypt. For Egypt, it was important, it was crucial that Pharaoh led his army, because he was, after all, a son of the gods. And so this is almost, well, it's great proof that this was written by somebody who did live, such as Moses, in Egypt. Then something else is interesting. They lift up their eyes. Every army would have banners, right? Well, in Egypt, they had war banners that had the emblems of their gods, and they believed that the gods imbued these banners with their power. In fact, there's a very famous battlefield palette. It's a carving, and it shows one of these banners with the arm coming from the banner and resting on the shoulder of a conquered prisoner. And that was the Egyptians' way of saying that their gods led them in battle and conquered their enemies. So when it says in verse 10 that they were afraid, remember, these are tribal Hebrews who are culturally Egyptian. They knew about Egyptian religion and ways of life. They knew all of these stories, and they were afraid, as well they should be, because Pharaoh was personally coming against them. Okay, so now we ask ourselves, what is the real point of this story, and how can archaeology help us to unpack this? Well, as I said, these people are steeped in the ways and knowledge of Egypt. And so Yahweh and certainly Moses find themselves on the horns of a dilemma. They have to figure out a way to get the Egypt out, if you will, of these people. In other words, Yahweh is going to do something that is designed to teach them faith in Him. So the real question here is, who is the real God? Is it Yahweh, or is it Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt? This is a forerunner of the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal. Who is the real God? Is it Yahweh, or is it Baal? Right? This is the same story, but it's before. And so I ask myself then, from an archaeological standpoint, is the location of this battle important? Or had all the good battle scenes been taken? Had Yahweh run out of great places to fight a battle? No. He purposefully chose this site. And you ask yourself, why? Why is that? Well, you have to know Egyptian creation mythology. They believed that the world began as limitless water, limitless darkness, limitless air, and that everything was formless and void. Sounds a lot like Genesis 1, doesn't it? Those are the Egyptian gods of chaos. They believed that the world that you and I live in sits on top of that watery abyss, and that at any time we could slip back into it. And therefore, as a son of the gods, it was Pharaoh's job to uphold the cosmic order, which they called Ma'at. Ma'at. And so that was represented by Pharaoh being responsible for making the Nile to overflow its banks every year so that the Egyptians could eat, that sort of thing. And so it's very fascinating that Yahweh, and this really takes us back to the beginning of the story where they're seemingly running around in the desert aimlessly. Oh no, Yahweh had a purpose. He was going to draw Pharaoh and his army out to the seaside. This was all with a purpose. And now, in hubris, what happens? Pharaoh goes right into the ocean. The seabed is dry. He takes all of his 600 chariots and they go in there. And what did Moses say? The Lord's looking down from the cloud and he reverses the curse. Now what happens? They all drown. Pharaoh and all of his army drown. Now why is this important? In the minds of the Israelites, they get it. Because for the ancient Egyptians and ancient Hebrews, there was nothing worse than drowning. Why? Because the ocean represented the abyss, the primordial ocean that the world as we know it is sitting upon, and they always believed that if you drowned, you were going down into the abyss. And so how apropos that Yahweh would drown Pharaoh in the abyss, in the ocean. Why is this important? What he's saying to the Israelites is Pharaoh could not even save himself from drowning in the abyss or the lack of ma'at, right? He couldn't stop it. Yahweh is proven to be the God, whereas Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt are proven to be weak sisters, so to speak. They drown in the ocean. And so the true purpose of this story is to show that Yahweh is God and that the children of Israel could count on Him to bring them to the promised land. We'll see you next time in Biblical Archaeology in 5.